Chapter 7. Carmen stood there frozen, barely breathing. Tony called over to her through a yawn. Hey, Carm, are you pretending to be a statue or something? All the kids were awake now. 4 sets of big grosso eyes were on her. The wicked witch of the West cast a spell on her, says Frankie. The kids all giggled, and Carmen knew they expected her to join in, but she couldn't laugh right now. She pushed open the door to the kitchen. She had to get out of the apartment before she burst into tears. She would go to the stable. Mr. Vita was in Connecticut, visiting his cousins. Carmen could get Rosie and take her to the park. She wouldn't have she wouldn't have to talk to anyone. She stumbled into the kitchen and headed straight for the coat rack. Mrs. Grasso stood up. Come in. Do you feel all right? Yes, but I'm going to school. Carmen lied, struggling to keep her voice steady. She threw on her coat. Mr. Lawrence wanted some help. So early? Mrs. Grasso said. It's barely 7. But Carmen was already in the hallway, ignoring the voices calling after her. She flew down the stairs and out the door onto the street. Her mind was swirling. How could they send her back? This couldn't be Nana's idea, could it? She and Carmen had been writing to each other non-stop, but Nana hadn't written a word about that. The Grassos knew how much Carmen missed Nana. Did they somehow think Carmen wanted to go back to Italy? Somehow she made it to the stable. She waved hello to Mr. Paolo, the cheery older man who was watching the horses while Mr. Vita was gone. She hurried to Rosie's stall. She didn't bother with the saddle, just climbed up and clicked her tongue. Rosie knew that meant go. They headed toward the park by the harbor. Usually the sound of Rosie's horseshoes on the cobblestones was smoothing to Carmen. But today each footstep was a hammer pounding on her heart. Clap, clap. She imagined herself saying goodbye to Mr. Vita. Clap, clap. To Mr. Grasso. Clap, clap. To Tony. She stroked Rosie's mane. Who would ride her after Carmen left? By the time they reached the park, Carmen's chest felt bruised. She looked out at the ships, remembering when she and Papa first sailed into Boston Harbor. Papa was so excited. Anything is possible in America. Papa always said, if you work hard, a person can be anything they want to be. You couldn't be anything you wanted to be in southern Italy, though, not unless you were already very rich. Papa had barely earned money as a farmer. All the men were farmers or fishermen. There were no other jobs, and girls, they got married and had babies. Carmen wanted a family of her own one day, but she didn't want that to be her only job. Maybe she'd be a teacher like Mr. Lawrence, or a nurse and help people who were sick. Or she could write a book, like the wonderful Wizard of Oz. She'd never do any of those things if she went back. There wasn't even a school in her village. Rosie came to a stop near the playground, as if she knew Carmen needed a break. Carmen slid down and buried herself in Rosie's mane, staring at her shiny new boots, the mare's soft white hair. Suddenly, anger boiled up inside her. She wasn't angry at the Grassos, not after everything they've done for her. She was mad at herself. All this time, she let herself feel part of the Grasso family. But Mrs. and Mr. Grasso already have 4 kids. Mr. Grasso worked at a construction site where he probably earned no more than $30 a week. Carmen should have eaten less. She should have tried to find a job in the factory or as a maid for one of the rich families outside of North End. And she shouldn't have accepted these boots for Christmas. Carmen kicked the door so hard that Rosie whined. "Sorry, girl," Carmen said, giving Rosie a gentle stroke on the forehead. Carmen paced back and forth, wrestling with the thoughts in her head. School would start soon, but Carmen decided, for the first time ever, to play hooky. Who did math or spell it matter now that she was going back to Italy? The only math she needed there would be for counting goats and rows of tomato plants. She never speak English again. Carmen stood there for what felt like hours, until she was so tired she had to sit down. She chose a spot under the tree and gazed out at the ships in the harbor. Again, she thought of Papa. It had been Papa's dream to come to America, but now Papa was gone, and so was the life they'd built. Maybe the glasses were right, Carmen realized. Maybe it was time to go back to Italy, to her old life, to where she could be with Nonna. Carmen leaned against the tree. She imagined her grandmother's arms around her. Then she closed her eyes and fell into a restless sleep. Chapter 8. 3 hours later, around noon, waterfront, the North End, Boston. Carmen's eyes snapped open and she scrambled to her feet. She thought she dozed off for a minute or two, but now the day was very bright and warm. She unbuttoned her coat and looked around. Some men were on benches with open lunch pails. It must be past noon. Carmen couldn't believe she slept so long. Everyone must be worried about her. She had to get back to the Grasso's apartment. Or maybe she should go back. She should go to school. Maybe she should. And then her insides turned to jelly. Where was Rosie? Carmen whirled around, but the horse was nowhere to be seen. What a fool Carmen was. She hadn't tied Rosie up, and now, what if the horse had wandered into the busy street? She could get hit by a motor car. That happened all the time. Before Carmen knew it, she was running, screaming Rosie's name. Carmen sprinted to the stable. She burst through the door and over to Rosie's stall. But Rosie wasn't there. Think, Carmen, think, she said to herself as she went back outside. Rosie was smart. Where would she go? Carmen stopped and looked around. It was always so crowded down here by the water, even more packed than the streets up where Carmen lived. Men were everywhere. Trucks and wagons rumbled by. Carmen was sprinting to a nearby shed when she noticed her eyes were watering. Her nose was burning too. Bleh! What a sickly sweet smell. Molasses, she realized. The smell that was thick in the air, worse than ever before. It even coated her throat. The molasses tank was just behind her. She turned around, and what she saw made her heart skip a beat. Rosie! The mayor was standing at the tank, licking molasses off the sides. Carmen almost cried with relief as she came up next to Rosie. Smart horse! Carmen remembered how Rosie licked the molasses from Tony's fingers. She must have smelled the molasses in the air and followed it right to the tank. So you wanted a little snack? Carmen said, patting Rosie's forehead. The male smacked her sticky lips. Her whiskers were dripping with goo. And I guess you're saving some for later, Carmen said. She grabbed a handkerchief from her pocket and started wiping Rosie's face. That's when she heard it. Carmen ignored the strange growling sounds. It was just the molasses boiling inside the tank. She knew that now. And then Carmen heard a familiar voice. Carmen! It was Tony. He was running toward her from back near the stable. Carmen swung herself up onto Rosie and clicked her tongue. They trotted over to meet Tony. His face was bright red, his hair damp with sweat. "Where have you been?" he said, his voice cracking. "We've been searching everywhere." He looked so worried she could tell he'd been crying. Carmen reached down and grabbed his hand. "I'm so sorry," she said. But she didn't know what to say. She felt terrible for disappearing like that, for disappearing like she had. And now she wondered, did Tony know about the plan to send her back to Italy? Did he realize that in a week Carmen would be gone and they'd never see each other again? Just the idea of saying goodbye to Tony, to everyone, made her whole body shake. But wait, it wasn't Carmen's body that was shaking. Ooh, Rosie's. It was the ground, and this time she felt sure there was an earthquake. Carmen gripped Rosie's neck tighter, expecting the ground to split apart. The horse snorted and nervously stamped her feet. "What's going on?" Tony said. A man near them screamed out the answer, in a voice filled with panic. "It's the tank!"